See. Hey guys, I'm not sure how many people are in yet. It's just kind of letting people in the room right now. So I'm just going to give it 2 minutes while it kind of admits people in, and then I'm just going to turn this over to Adam, and I will just be quietly in the background. Thanks for joining us tonight. I know summer evenings are not people's favorite time to sit behind a computer and learn, but I appreciate you being here. So I'm going to give it till 7:02, and then we are going to get moving. Okay, just a couple of housekeeping items before I introduce Adam. So I'm Rachel Kinder with Mission West Virginia. Thanks for joining us. We are recording this and we will make it available on our website towards the end of the week. So if you have anyone that you think would benefit from this, you should be able to send them a link later. Also, I can send out a certificate for if you are with a foster care agency or you need in-service hours. I don't have CEUs approved, but I can give you a certificate of attendance. My design person who makes all those certificates is on vacation. So if you will just bear with me for a couple days, I will get those out in the mail at the end of the week. So I am going to introduce Adam Starks, and I'm just going to turn this presentation over to him. If you have questions, you can put them in the chat or the Q&A, and if there's an appropriate time for me to interrupt, I will ask those questions. Otherwise, Adam, it's all yours.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much, Rachel, and thanks to all of those out there joining us tonight. I will try to make this as interesting as possible for the summer season, so let's see what we can do. Tonight, we're talking about raising troubled youth. I am well experienced as a former troubled youth myself. All right, tonight we're going to talk about soothing your doubts and overcoming the obstacles to fostering children. I always credit my success to the right people being at the right place at the right time. So I had a community that never gave up on me, and I had foster parents who didn't give up on me either. I am the author of Broken Child, Mended Man. That's my autobiography where I highlight my time in foster care and what it took to become a successful adult. And more recently, Love Will Find Your Home, which is a book that serves as an ode to foster parents. All right, and you can find out more about me at adamstarks.com. So let's talk about me a little bit. All right, that little nappy-headed kid up there in the shell uniform, that was my start. And you know, to become the man I am today, I still to this day credit my foster parents, my teachers, my coaches, and all of those inspirational people throughout the community that said, "Hey, Adam, you know, we expect more of you. We know you can do this. You know, come on, straighten up. You know, we're here for you. We're cheering for you." And having people like that in your corner is what makes you know, successful children become successful adults. Right. So I was born 1980, 40 years ago in California to a fatherless household. My father was out of the picture before I was even born. And my mother she was living off of the system and with a ninth grade education. So right then and there, I didn't have much to go on in terms of upward mobility. In this today in 2021, it's nearly impossible to repeat my story. And so that's why I'm here telling my story now, is so we can gather those pieces together to make sure as many children as possible become successful, whether it's in West Virginia or elsewhere. So California, unfortunately, we were evicted from our apartment. My mother had problem with alcohol. She was addicted to alcohol. And then later on, she was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. And there's no telling how long she had that. And so we left California for Virginia. It was me and my two brothers, Noah and Christopher, who were about 18 months apart. And going from palm trees and concretes in a high-rise apartment to a farm uh, with an outhouse was a culture shock, to say the least. Um, that that moment, I remember cows being the size of dinosaurs and chickens, just terrorizing me. And I was determined that I was not going to survive the farm life. But another thing hit me, which was food insecurity. We didn't have a lot of food, even though there was my uncle and my aunt living on the farm, raising cattle, and bush hogging hay and all that stuff. Food was scarce, and when I started kindergarten, that was my saving grace. I noticed and it wasn't because I was learning or anything. It was I saw a lot of kids throwing food away, um, and or not eating something, and so I would stuff those little pockets that you see there in the childhood picture. I would stuff those pockets full of whatever I could get in there. Green beans, chicken nuggets, corn, slices of pizza, whatever it took, and I would empty it on the table so my brothers and I could eat at the end of the day. And this went on for about 4 years before we were finally intercepted at school. My brother Noah and I were intercepted at school and taken to another family. And in that time between kindergarten and third grade, I had missed 150 days of school. Uh, you look at truancy laws now, and that kind of thing just doesn't happen and there's a good reason for it. A child can get so far behind the curve. I was fortunate enough to recover, but I didn't. I would say I did not recover until about my sophomore year in college, where I was caught up and I understood what was going on in my math classes and how to structure a proper book report and how to comprehend the books and the text that I was reading. And so, really, up until that point, I was faking it until made it. And the toughest thing about kindergarten through third grade what was the food issues, but it was also that I was just different, and I knew I was different. It wasn't necessarily a race issue at that point, although it did become a race issue along the lines. But it was I was poor, and that was something that I could not quite put my finger on. My clothes didn't fit. I didn't have enough to eat. I didn't have a bed to sleep in at night, and these are things that a lot of children that I grew up with took for granted. And I made friends. I played with the kids as much as I could, and I led a normal as possible life. But in the end, I had to be put into a home where I was going to be taken care of, because if I stayed in this environment, obviously I was not going to succeed. um, you can't succeed when your mother is incapable of taking care of you. And one of the things I advocate for today is reunification. In this instance, that would not have been ideal, just because my mother is still to this day battling paranoid schizophrenia. She did overcome the alcohol addiction with help through the systemic channels, and that was a wonderful outcome, but she was nowhere near prepared or equipped mentally or emotionally to take care of our family. And so it took me a long time to um, and to not blame myself for what happened, because my brothers were two of my brothers were missing. She had another child when we moved to Virginia, and his name was Moses, and I never reconnected with him. However, Christopher, although he went to another home, we did end up reconnecting few short years later. Noah and I stayed together, and the painful part of this story here is I thought we were going to a movie. We were taken from school. The social worker said, "Hey, we're going to go see a movie." And I guess that was to keep us calm for where we were really going, which was a foster home. And it was fine in terms of, that night I slept in my own bed for the very first time. I had a meal at a table for the very first time, and but the entire time I couldn't stop thinking about what happened to Christopher, what happened to Moses, and I blame myself for that. And it wasn't until probably my high school years where I realized that, you know what, this was the best possible thing for us. And but I had to come to that conclusion myself. There wasn't a counselor or a teacher or a foster parent that helped me come to that conclusion. And so I would say, one piece of advice I always give people is talk to the children, talk them through the process, because they understand a lot more than adults give them credit for. Excuse me. And so that is extremely important. If you want them to trust you, you have to communicate with them. Just like adults, our coworker. You think about your coworkers or your colleagues or your family. If they don't communicate with you, you have a hard time trusting them. Children operate the same way. So instead of going to a movie, I ended up with this white foster family, and that was perfectly fine. Like I said, it was a good home. It was a loving home. They took care of me to the best of their ability. And everything was fine as long as we stayed in my school system in Rappahannock County, Virginia. However, the next year or next year and a half, we moved over to a neighboring county in Culpeper. And the issue here was, here I am, the start of hip hop culture, and its influence in Black culture. And here I am, off-brand tennis shoes, a polo shirt, yellow and black, and I'm sitting here looking like a big bumblebee in these off-brand, well, not off-brand shoes, but Wrangler jeans. And so I was a target from day one. I go into the schools predominantly Black, and they just did not like me. They did not like my corny accent, as they called it. I didn't talk like them. I didn't walk like them. I didn't act like them. And so I was not one of them. I wasn't good enough. And that year, the only thing learned in that fifth grade year was to grow a set of eyes in the back of my head. Teachers laughed at me. The principals wouldn't give me the benefit of the doubt. For some reason, I was just everyone's whipping boy. And psychologically, it just damaged me to a point where I didn't want to go on. I hadn't contemplated anything as serious as suicide, but it was, I just did not know how to keep going. So social services said, enough of this. We can't let him go through this. They didn't know everything that was going on because I couldn't articulate how I felt, and I didn't feel like telling every time I was pushed down a flight of steps, or had spitballs spit at my head the entire class, or had my lunch tray knocked over on the floor, whatever the case may have been. They decided to move me back to Rappahannock County with a Black family, mainly a Black foster mother, first time foster mother. And things were going well at first. She bought me the clothes that were in. Um, Again, it wasn't important until it was. And kids can be especially cruel if someone's a little bit different. And I was that socially awkward, different kid that didn't wear what they were wearing. So she, brought me up to speed there. I got the right kind of haircut, and um, everything seemed to be going okay. But I had some anger issues, long seated anger issues that I just hadn't dealt with i- in any way. I went to counselors, but I didn't trust them, and I talk about that in the book. I won't go into it much here, but I had trouble trusting people, especially any kind of authority figures. And so here I am starting sixth grade. And like I said, I missed 150 days of school. And so I'm well behind the curve. We're supposed to be writing book reports, or we're starting algebra, and all of it is just absolute Greek to me. And so that compounded the anger issues that I hadn't dealt with being picked on incessantly for over a year. And then now I don't understand this work, and now I'm not good enough for my foster family either. And so I just feel like I'm failing everywhere. And so I just start acting out. I just start rebelling against not just Rappahannock, but my community, but the world. I was ready to take on the world, and I had my fist balled up, and I had my teeth clenched, and that was my um, method of survival. I was going to be a hellion, and I did that for about three years. Even though things were pretty stable, a good house, I was safe, and I was well fed and cared for. But I just could not get my act together. In ninth grade, I was in danger of failing, and my foster mother had a one of those come to Jesus talks with me, and it was just something about what she said. It just stuck with me, and I said, you know what, it's time. I don't want to be this way. I want to be somebody, and I need to find a way to change that. And the only way I knew how to do that was to bring all my books home. So I started that, and before that last grading period, and I got straight A's and B's and passed by the skin of my teeth. And then I stayed on the honor roll until my senior year. I discovered track and field, and my track and field coach um, introduced me to the possibility of going to college. Now, I didn't think some, poor country bumpkin like me could end up at college, especially with as much as I struggled to learn. But he really believed in me for some reason, and once he put that idea in my head, I went with it, and he helped me where he could, and the teachers saw me, trying to help myself, and so they joined the process. That whether it was tutoring hours before my practices started, or whatever it took, they wanted to see me succeed. Once they saw me helping myself, because they knew my story, and they knew that the only ticket out was a high school diploma. So uh, we get to that point, and I make it to college, and I make it through college, and I have three kids of my own now. And they're 16, 13, and 7. And they are the love of my life, along with my wife of almost 20 years. And so I'm one of those success stories. I broke the cycle. And, even though I saw my mother being abused, I saw drugs, I saw alcohol, none of that has been a sustaining part of my life. And I admit, and I write about that very candidly in the book. I did have a struggle with alcohol there for a moment early on, but it was something that I was able to overcome, and I'm much stronger for it. So just those are things to keep in mind. That child coming of age, becoming a man, and learning from mistakes. And I had plenty of them to go around. Some of them funny, some of them not so funny, that are serious. And so, what we're going to talk about tonight is through my experience, through my observations, helping others counsel their foster children when they just felt like just throwing their hands up. I'm going to try to explain everything that these children are going through, so through a child's eyes, so to speak. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. I believe Rachel is fielding all of those. All right. So this is one thing I like to show. When a child comes into your home, it is unlikely that you know their entire story, at least from their perspective. And so one of the things I like to show people is this at-risk child trauma spectrum. And I would say over here, dad took my iPhone. That's about the extent of the trauma that my kids experience. And so it's not a whole lot that they've witnessed. Now, I've told them stories. I've told them stories about what some children may go through here in Barber County, and I teach them to be kind to students, and embrace those students, and be friends with them, because they need a friend more than anyone. All right, so let's take that. Dad took my iPhone off and get a little serious here. All right, that green line, this is where I would put myself. All right, I wasn't sexually abused, although I did grow up in a fatherless home. That wasn't as traumatic as a parent dying, or something like that. Um, and I did experience a brief period of homelessness, but it was 2 weeks before college, and and another family took me in and helped me get through my college years. And so this is right about where I would put myself. If you're dealing with anything, whoops, moving that line, over towards the right, obviously those situations are going to be more challenging, and it may require professional help. And the way the system is set up right now, there is still plenty of help available for those children through therapy, and not just counseling, but there's pet therapy, dance therapy, art therapy, whatever connects with them and gets them out of their traumatic, what I call a traumatic survival zone, where they're just here all the time, and it doesn't matter. As a foster parent, it doesn't seem like it matters what you say. They are going to do what they want, and they're just in constant survival mode, and it's hard to break them out of that. And that's something I knew from experience. All right. So I always love to add this slide, because too often in this country, and West Virginia is no different. We throw away our children. All right, and what I mean by that is, it's easy to put them in a juvenile detention center. That's what almost happened to me. I was a hellion, and I admit it. As a 40-year-old man now, looking back at that, I was like, wow, I really put my foster mother through the ringer, and it was, some of it just seemed unnecessary, and some of it was just me being bad. And unfortunately, I had to come to that conclusion, and I came to the right conclusion. But not every child has that ability to come to that conclusion and meet that challenge in time before they end up in juvenile imprisonment. And that system, can lead to the school to prison pipeline, and they may never, get out from behind bars. Over medication is another issue. It was so bad at one point throughout this country that California, Pennsylvania, and Florida, within the past 5 to 7 years, have put out laws banning over medicating foster children. It's easy to give them a pill. ADHD or ADD are serious impediments to their learning and maybe to their behavior, but it's important to understand that that pill is only a partial solution. It's not the entire solution, because pills can turn some of these kids, depending on how they react to it. You have a kid one moment and then you have a zombie the next moment. And yeah, it may have dealt with a behavior issue at the time, but it's not going to deal with their long-term issues of possible dependency and their inability to cope with the challenges that they face throughout this life. Because look, I'm telling you, even in the nuclear household, coming from that environment, life is still hard. You still have to make decisions, and everything doesn't always go your way. For me, I lost a business last year, and it was one of the hardest things for me to do, to close those doors. But it was something that had to happen, and it was awful. I felt awful. But I didn't go take a bunch of pills or, drink myself into a stupor, because I had a family that depended on me. So I needed to find a way to make money and support them. And I did that. However, it's had I been over medicated throughout my formative years, I may not have been able to come to those conclusions. It may have been, you know what, I can't do this. I have failed. And so I'm going to take drugs, or I'm going to drink myself into oblivion. And that's the danger of over medication. Just because it's legal and just because it's prescribed by a doctor, uh, it's not the full on solution. So just keep that in mind. Keep an open mind to a more holistic approach. Deal with that ADHD or deal with that ADD, or whatever mental ailments they may have, but understand that there's a more holistic approach to addressing the issues that need to be addressed. And then school instability. Let's delve into that. All right. So I have a little. I'm not going to read this infographic to you, but this is from Echo Parenting. I love this just because it lays things out. What should you do with a trauma informed foster child or a child? So understanding behavior is the first aspect that I want to talk about here. So, these are things that I did: fighting, stealing, yelling, cursing, all right, just all social avoidance. All right. Now, when you look at how a child interacts with the society around it, whether it's in school or whether it's in your home, there are some things you have to understand. They are most likely in a state of survival or survival mode. And when, did you have something, Rachel?
Well, we had a question that was kind
Oh,
of on this topic.
sure.
That as fosters, like you said, are not always given the full story of a child. So, how can you help when you don't know what to help with? If you can maybe address that while you're covering this topic, like when you don't know what trauma the child has experienced.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And yeah, great question. And to answer it right off the bat is, sit them down in a comfortable environment, whether it's at the dinner table and it's just the two of you, or whether it's at a park, just a nice, safe, relaxing setting, and have them tell you what they're comfortable telling you. All right, and you can break the ice with, uh, you know, um, uh, what subject do you like in school, or do you like certain sports, or do you like science or math, or something like that, to break the ice. And then from there, ask them about their story. What can they tell you? What's special about them, or um, and these are the tough questions. Again, you may think asking about their mom and dad may be off limits, but you know, what they tell you, the information that they give you will be tools that you can use later to help them. And so whatever they've been through, like I show you that trauma spectrum, you're going to use um, different tools in your toolbox for one child that may have been through a drug infested home versus one that has been sexually abused, so to speak. That those require two very different types of therapy. All right. So if a child like me, one of the reasons I started fighting um, at that predominantly black school I told you about in Culpeper, Virginia, those kids ganged up on me. Sometimes it was up to 5 kids kicking me in the head, kicking me in the ribs, shoving me into a toilet. Um, I would go, to on the bath, a restroom break, and there'd be 5 of them right behind me to crack my head against the urinal. Um, and I had no way to defend myself. And so when people picked on me when I went to Rappahannock and things were supposed to be, quote unquote, stable with a family of the same race, uh, I I decided it was time to stick up for myself, and so I put my fist up, and I knocked out anyone who crossed me because I felt like I had to defend myself. Um, Looking back at it, it's probably something I could have been coached through, because obviously you don't want to solve all of your problems with, fist fighting and things of that nature. However, one of the things that happened to me, one of the disciplinary things was spankings, or being slapped in the face or slapped upside the head and smacked with a belt and things of that nature. The problem with doing that to a kid that has been in an abusive household is you're only going to compound the problem. So, excuse me, you're going to have to find different uh, consequences. And I'm not talking about timeout or, something that is soft. If it works, great. But something like taking something away, or taking something of value away, or, if the other kids get ice cream and he doesn't because uh, he didn't do the dishes that night for the family. And I'm just giving examples here. Um, those kind of consequences will make them sit down and think, next time I want ice cream, so I need to do whatever my parents are asking of me, versus slapping them in the face. Now you're giving them an excuse to say, you know what, that's how I'm going to handle my problems, because they can only emulate what they see. And if the parents are coping that way, and it took me a little bit of time to get out of this habit with my kids, because that's what I knew. Um, so my first son, yeah, I did spank him when he got out of line and things like that, but I got away from that because I could see that how he was handling things with anger, um, similar to what I was doing. And then when I took a step back and said, "Hey, you're not supposed to do it like this, yeah, or do things like this because so and so, these are the consequences," and getting him to think through those processes, now I have a well-rounded young man versus someone who acts out in anger like I did when I was his age. Um, and it's just one thing. Stealing is another thing that I went through. I was trying to sell things, candy and art and things of that nature, to save up for some of the clothing items I wanted. Well, a teacher and a principal came by and told me, well, I can't do that, so I had to shut down my business, and then I couldn't make the money that I wanted to make, and so I resorted to stealing, which was wrong, right? That was wrong, but that was the reason I did it. And before then, when I was stealing food from the cafeteria to feed my brothers. Now that's a more justified form of stealing, at least in my mind, still to this day. If someone needed to steal food to feed their family, I say that that's justified. But that's based on my experience. And so I can only go on my experience alone. Stealing just for the sake of stealing, like a TV or something like that, obviously that's not something that you need. So that's wrong. But food is needed for sustenance, for survival. So just keep those things in mind. If that child steals food and hoards it, that is an incredibly common problem. They may hoard food behind the bed and things of that nature, and it's a survival technique. Even though they're in a safe household, their mind is still operating in a certain way, and you can sit them down and tell them, there will always be food to eat. You don't have to steal. You don't have to hide it because there will always be enough food for you as long as you're in my home, or something to that effect. Yelling is another one. You have to be careful. I still get loud, scolding my kids sometimes, but I also have to keep in mind that I'm a 220 pound, 6'4" man, and they are a little child, and so if I'm yelling at them, I look like that monster on Monsters Inc. And you're just terrifying them, and they're going to shut down. And truth be told, you could be yelling at the top of your lungs, and they're not listening to you. My middle child, he probably woke me up to that the most, because he just doesn't react well to it. But if I explain things to him again, and this doesn't work for every kid. Again, you have to try different techniques. And with my three, it's they're all very different in terms of how we dole out consequences. But my middle child really did not react well to my yelling, and it just terrified him. And so that made me feel, lower than dirt, because I don't want that father-son relationship severed because I couldn't get a hold of my anger and find a more creative way to deal with this, a more creative way to deal with it. Um, uh, Cursing is another one. This is, as society, progresses, in the things that we hear, whether it's on TV or on the radio, you know, no one has quote unquote virgin ears anymore, but some households are definitely rougher than others. Excuse me, when it comes to language, and so it matters, how you speak to each other. That matters in teaching them. We don't say the F word in this house. Um we don't call each other that here, because that's offensive and that hurts other people, and we want to treat people with respect. Would you like to be called that name? Does that make you feel good? And nine times out of ten, the kid is going to say no. And and if you can get them to think through those things, and it requires repetition. It requires an immense amount of repetition. And here I am, 16 years, still telling my oldest son some of the same things, and I feel like I have 2 more years to get this through his head. But you have to be in it for the long haul. They're not going to change overnight, especially a foster child. Um, they will emulate behavior that they see after a while, especially if it's already ingrained in children that you already have, or whether biological or other foster children. Um, so just keep those things in mind. Patience is definitely, a virtue, and if you can exercise that patience, it will change them for the better in the long term. All right. And celebrate the short victories, or celebrate the small victories in the short term. There we go. All right. Avoidance. They just don't want to be around people. you know some people are just shy, and that's okay. However, if they've had a traumatic experience, there's likely more to it than just shyness, and that's going to come out through therapy and the other issues. And so, as they establish confidence, I know for me, when I discovered my outlet in track and field, I was more open to friendships and talking to complete strangers, on the opposite team and things of that nature. But before then, no way, absolutely not. I'm not going to just put myself out there and make myself vulnerable because my survival, I'm still partially in survival mode, and I don't want to let anyone else in that I'm going to have to learn how to trust. So I would just rather not trust them and avoid them altogether. So again, just trying to get you to think through a child's eyes, even, as my 16-year-old self, those were the things that were going through my mind. And that was just how I viewed the world. And that was my way of surviving. Right. So the process of correction, right? Rachel and I were talking about this earlier. Pick and choose your battles because if you want to maintain your sanity, what you are doing right now as a foster parent is a hero's work because you have decided, what, I don't want a society where we throw away children in juvenile detention centers or just let them go by the wayside. So you're doing the real work. But as you already know, it is difficult work. It is a challenge, but it can be so rewarding. And so the process of correction is picking and choosing your battles. Because if you zero in on this kid and everything that they're doing wrong, you are veering down a dark path, so to speak, when it comes to establishing a meaningful relationship with this child. The only way you're going to get through to them is to, again, talking to them, communicating why things are done this way. Um, I was talking about one of my a friend of mine who recently took in another foster youth who only ate sugary cereals. Well, they only have plain Cheerios and the wheat, the mini wheats without the frosting and stuff like that. And so this kid, he's sneaking sugar cubes out of one of the little tea bowls and putting it in the Cheerios to sweeten them up. Because that's what he's used to. Is it wrong? Yes. But does he understand why? Absolutely not. Not at this stage in the game. He's brand new to a home that is orderly. They have their kids out doing things, and they're excellent kids. They're well behaved, but he did not grow up in that environment. So therefore, he's going to do what he knows until he can emulate the behavior of the other children and see the benefit of that behavior. Right now, he can't see it. Right now, he's just in a new environment, and that can be traumatizing in and of itself. Like I said, with my situation, when I first went into a foster home, yes, I had my own bed. Yes, I had a full course meal, and that was all wonderful. But my sense of normal was taking care of my brothers, and all of a sudden they weren't there. And so if a child has that situation going on, they're not going to be appreciative of the home that you've opened up to them, even though they should be. But you have to understand from the child's perspective, they're not going to be. All right, they are still in survival mode, and that's just the way it is for them until one day the light bulb turns on. Right. Learning and behavior. We always want these kids to get through school if they can just make it through school. And so school systems pass them on. There were probably a few grades that I did not deserve to pass, but I did. And we still have kids graduating to this very day that can't read a book. And it's all about getting them through the system and then letting the adult system handle them, which is really the wrong way to go about it. If your student truly has a learning disability, one of the first things we should do is have them tested and get them the appropriate help and support that they need. Um, I just want to let you all know it is raining and storming here, so hopefully things won't cut out my internet or something. But if it does, I will come back as soon as possible. That being said, have them tested. There's plenty of resources available for that, and then once they're tested, put them in the classes or put them with the teachers in the special ed workforce that they need to be involved with. And then learn their history. Again, take that step back, learn what you can about them. Was their father killed in a car accident? Was their mother addicted to drugs? Or it could be something less terrible than that. It could be just they lost their home and they're homeless. And that's not less terrible, but it's less traumatic. I guess I should say. Um, Engage their interest. Track and field didn't necessarily turn me into an Olympian, but it did give me a ticket to college. And while college may not be for everyone, vocational school may be for some of these students. One of the stories I love to tell, I was part of the movement, a small part, but a part nonetheless, of helping students engage in robotics in Barber County. Now, when I was on the school board campaign trail, a lot of people said, "Oh, these kids don't need any of that. It's too fancy, it's too advanced for them." I said, "No, that's nonsense." So it shouldn't matter. Our zip code shouldn't matter. You know, and I would tell them stories about like the Rocket Boys, Homer Hickam wrote about, and things like that. I said that those Rocket Boys could be right here in Barber County, and we wouldn't know it because we don't believe in them. So it's time to start believing in them. And we got some kids interested in robotics. And this one boy, he was living, his parents, were very poor, living in a dirt floor house. And I can sympathize with that because I had the same thing, the outhouse, the side busted out of my home. And so, I could really relate to this kid and sympathize with him. But one thing that I didn't have the opportunity to do was to have robotics and mechanical engineering stuff put right in front of me. So I'll never know. But this kid got that opportunity and he shined. And he was in Louisville, Kentucky with 10,000 other kids from 32 countries. And here was little Barber County, West Virginia, in the mix. And that that's the potential in every single child that's out there. And if we can tap into that, tap into their resilience, we would see a wealth of intellectual resource that this country just wastes day in and day out. So we need to embrace these children and engage their interest wherever that light bulb may click. And so it may take a ton of things. It may be baseball, it may be track and field, it may be dancing, theater, robotics. There's so many things out there for these children that they should be engaged in, other than just sitting in the chair and taking tests and regurgitating information through English and math. And those subject matters are important, but if a child does not feel safe, if a child is hungry, if a child is dealing with matters at home that we couldn't even imagine, they're not going to learn in that seat. And so if we can find a way to give them an escape without over medicating them, or giving them some sense of relief, some sense of self-esteem. If we can do that, I think that is the secret to um, it's the secret to their success, and it was certainly the secret to mine. All right. So tapping into that resilience and overcoming learning difficulties. Um, Again, children are going to find, for me, English and math were extremely difficult subjects, until I got the hang of it. You can't afford to be behind the curve as far as I was, and then expect to succeed through school. So encourage them. This math is hard, but you've been through this and this, and you've survived. You are wonderful. You are amazing. You are awesome. Whatever it takes, right? In words that they understand. I know you can get through this if you just focus, on this subject. Yes, it's math. Yes, it's hard, but we're going to do this, and we're going to do it together. Let them know that they're not in it alone. All right, and last slide, and then we'll have time for some more Q&A. All right, coping mechanisms. Again, the tutor doctor, I borrowed one of their slides here. I just love it. Well, other than the heart shape, but it gives some aha moments there for you to take away. And Rachel, please feel free to share this slide deck with them. There's some resources after the Q&A that they're more than welcome to have, that have certainly helped me with these speeches and in parenting my own children. Coping mechanisms, again, combating addictions in all forms. I tell my boys every day, I said, look, you've got to come off of this video game addiction. Go out and do something. Go out and explore. Let's do something together. Whatever it may be. So for me, back in my day, it was Nintendo or a Sega Genesis. I was just in that world, and I was just hooked on it, and I had to beat that game. And it was at the detriment of my grades until my foster mother, my first foster mother, had to show me some tough love and take it away from me. Again, that is a very worthwhile consequence, and is very motivational. If you have video game systems in your house, um, that's one of the first things I go for my kids. If they can't seem to find that balance, it is my job as a parent to intervene and take over by either taking it away or setting time limits. If school grades, they know if they bring anything less than the best in what they can do, which it's A's and B's in our house. I have very high standards, and they meet those standards. But if they bring anything less, then they lose the tech, and that's just the way it is. And it's not me being mad at them, yelling at them. It's just, what, this is going to disappear for a while until you figure out that your school and your subjects are a more important priority. Addiction, again, over medication. I cannot stress this enough. Please just make sure that if they have to be medicated at all, make sure it is the right mix, and they're not just sitting there being a zombie and missing out on their what would be their formative years. A lot of school systems and a lot of parents, including myself, we have turned to mindfulness or yoga, just those deep breath, and poses, whether it's tree pose, child pose, dog pose, whatever, shark pose. I don't know. I made that up. All right. So that I don't think there's a shark pose. But if there is, make it up, make it fun, do it together, and make it, make it fun for them, and make it fun for yourself. I know it certainly helps me in the stressful moments of my life. And then finally, exercise. yeah, kids are sitting too much. Studies have shown for adults, sitting is the new smoking. We have got to get up and move more, and that the same thing goes for our kids. They've got to move and get that blood flowing so they can get their mind working in normal fashion. And so that I'll leave it at that. I'd like to open up this time for Q&A. All right, left you a quote there from Rita Pearson, and yeah, Rachel, take it away.
Well, I have my own question, but somebody's got one in the chat here.
Sure.
Um, Thanks for sharing your story. It sounds like you had the power to find your way. There are a lot of children that don't, that don't. How can we as fosters help those who do not have the desire to succeed in life?
Yeah.
It's a big question.
Well, yeah, that's an excellent question, and it's again, it's something you have to be in it for the long haul. And at the very beginning, I said, I think my success to the right people being in the right place at the right time. And so it's all about using your community resources and understanding that you don't have to do this alone. I think a lot of foster parents, it's me and that child, and that's not necessarily the case. And so use all of the resources at your disposal, whether it's through Mission West Virginia or whether it's through DHHR. Make sure you have all of the help that you need to make sure that that child gets everything that they need, whether it's counseling. And again, it doesn't have to be, just talking. It could be, there are many evidence-based therapeutic practices out there, and it may just be a matter of finding what clicks for them.
Another question, how can we get our kids in classes more informed and supported in the area of mindfulness?
That is another good question. It really depends on where you're at and the school systems that take. I know here in Barber County, there are some teachers who are wholly on board with it, and then there are some who are just like, maybe not. And so it really depends on if the school system uh, is open to it. I guess I'll put it that way, because I know like in Alabama, they banned it back in 1996 because of the Hindu link. There's no Hindu in the yoga or mindfulness that I do, and there's nothing wrong with that if you practice that religious faith. But that's not where schools are going with it. West Virginia doesn't have any laws like that on the books. So what I would recommend is encouraging maybe the board bringing it up to your local school board and seeing if you could start the program that way. Or that's a really good question. That's where I would start, but you may not have to go that route. It may just be something as simple as, let's say if you lived in, let's say if you lived in Kanawha County, type in mindfulness programs for children in Kanawha County, and you may be surprised at what you find. There may be a little mindfulness or yoga studio for children off the beaten path somewhere.
Personally, we've given some emergency grants to a few county school systems, and I've noticed more interest in teachers buying sensory items for their classrooms.
Yeah.
Which I think is good, because that has benefits a lot of different issues that kids might be dealing with, like sensory issues, but also ADHD and also trauma. They all mesh together.
Yeah, they're intertwined for sure.
Yes. And here's another, you guys are full of good questions tonight. Here's another question. Adam, do you think we can ever get to the point where kids in foster care automatically are evaluated for trauma issues and then receive the appropriate care? That's the dream, isn't it?
That is absolutely the dream, and that should be the standard. Unfortunately, there aren't enough resources dedicated to the amount of the influx of foster children, especially in West Virginia and throughout the nation. And until we get more resources directed that way, I don't know if we can afford the services. We can't not afford to do it, if that makes sense. We need to do this because otherwise, I think we're going to end up with a much more serious problem in the future, uh, dealing with people who haven't been properly cared for throughout their formative years. But yeah, whew, that's an excellent question. Now, I wish I wish I could spearhead the lead on something like that. And I've tried with factions of DHHR, but obviously unsuccessful to this point.
There's really good chats going on in the chat box. I will save that, Adam, so you can read it
Okay,
all when this is
sure.
over.
Mhm.
Someone else commented that you are so inspiring. We've had the greatest struggle finding mental health resources. We need to help our children heal and overcome many difficult obstacles. Do you have any recommendations for families like ours who are struggling to stay afloat and have had preventable outcomes due to the lack of resources and providers? That's, I personally know, finding trauma-informed therapists and foster care and adoption informed therapy, it's tough.
Yeah, and at this point, it, and I hope I don't offend anyone here because I know everyone is doing their absolute best, but West Virginia just simply doesn't have enough resources, monetary or personnel resources, to address the the influx of challenging issues related to children with mental health problems. Um, there are some text banks out there, and Rachel, I'll do a little bit of research. I used this last year, but I can't remember. But there are some resources where you can text people, and they can walk you through getting the resources that you need outside of the state, because obviously we're not equipped to deal with the issue that we have on our hands right now.
And just for the education of the group, WVU Extension has at least one person who provides mindfulness/yoga training at no charge in the classroom. So that, I thought that was great to know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, Here is my question. So April Dinwiddie did our webinar a couple weeks before Adams, and she and I were kind of prepping for the webinar, and she mentioned, we were talking about transracial adoption, and she mentioned that sometimes we overlook differences in class being a hard adjustment for kids, and not thinking about, like, kids in poverty are very disadvantaged, but when poverty is what you know, it can be a real shock to be placed with a foster family that's middle class. And I
Mhm.
wondered your opinion on that, Adam.
Yeah, that again, it's better. Obviously, it's better to move up in class, because there are things like a meal at the table that you can depend on, or sheets to cover you up, things that those families take for granted. And if you move up to that level, then obviously that's advantageous for the child. However, those things are material, and until we can get that child's to mentally wrap around the benefits of that lifestyle, um or in what am I trying to say here? By dealing with their shortcomings, whether it's trauma based, or whether it's they just don't know. A child coming into that situation doesn't know what they don't know. Their normal was very different from me using an outhouse, and then going to using a toilet. And my foster mother had to teach me how to flush. I didn't know how to flush a toilet. I didn't need to, but that's not something that you think about. It's like, won't this crazy kid flush the toilet? I mean, but and something I wrote about in my book is getting paddled for staying in the shower too long. I used to play out in the rain all the time. And so, but here it is, rain coming out of the wall. I mean, this is amazing. And so, and there's 5 other people waiting for a shower. And here I am, my, little naked butt has used all the hot water, and I kept doing it and doing it because it was fun. And there were no consequences for me. It was the next person that had to take a cold shower. And so, I ended up getting paddled. But those are just examples of, you're going to have to teach them things that you would not have to expect. And it's just like, when I worked at Panera Bread, one of my first jobs out of college was being a manager at Panera Bread. There were rich kids who drove BMWs and Mercedes to work. And they would come to work, to build character. And I had to teach them how to sweep and mop. And you would, it was just something I always knew how to do. Like, how in the world do these kids not know how to sweep and mop? And it turns out, one of them, she was just like, well, we had servants to do that. So it's like, excuse me, and that's upper the upper echelons of class. But you get what I'm saying. I mean, you're going to always expect the unexpected. I guess that's the best way to put it.
Yeah, don't assume that a behavior is on purpose when maybe they don't know. Questions, and last chance for questions. We're going to wrap up. I'm really glad your internet has held up, Adam. I hear that it's there's bad weather.
Oh yeah, it's really coming down here. Nothing like Morgantown though. That was, I don't know if you saw those images. That was insane.
That's what I was hearing, is that Morgantown got it bad too. Okay, well, I think that's the end of the questions. I mean, they were great, the ones that we got. So
thank you so much.
I will send out a follow-up email. Just give me a couple days till my help is back in the office to make those certificates, and we'll get a link online so that people can who missed it can catch it later. But Adam, always insightful and helpful, and I appreciate everything. And I'll save the chat for you to read, Adam. So thanks everybody, and we'll see you soon.
Yeah, thank you. Have a good evening.